today's a little different.
Welcome, welcome.
It's a little different because I know that y'all have been seeing our last two episodes. We've been in the new set because we're now on YouTube. Um,
Mhm.
but we're back to our roots, which is the the virtual recording. Just because we have someone amazing on the podcast here, but we happen not to be in the same city. And it doesn't matter if we're not in the same city. Y'all need to hear this conversation. So we are gonna be going back to our virtual recording. You're still gonna get a YouTube video. Um, you're still going to be able to watch this on YouTube and also get the audio on Spotify, but it will just not be on the regular set. So just wanted to give that heads up. But welcome back. We're excited to be here. The conversation today is going to be about the trauma of immigration. This is something
Fun.
that Moya and I are very passionate about. Moya, we've had this conversation, well, on our
We
own.
have,
Yeah.
yeah.
We're very passionate about this topic, but we also wanted to bring someone here to shed more light, a
hmm
professional, because Moyo and I, we just yap sometimes, and sometimes we don't really know what we're talking about.
And we
So
don't have
we
degrees
don't have degrees in some of these conversations.
and designations. Yeah.
Yeah, so we wanted to have someone here. We were talking about how immigration has affected people's upbringings, mental health, or lack thereof, and how they relate to the world. We'll be talking about the complicated family dynamics that come with immigration, and also how people can cope with the difficulties that come with immigration. But yeah, I'm so excited for this conversation. Like I said multiple times, I've been hinting there's someone here. We have
hmm
Bisola on the podcast. Woo! I'll
A very, very special
Yes,
guest. This
yes.
is the second Bisola that we're having
on the
on the
podcast.
podcast,
We're
which is pretty
so
cool.
excited to have you here, Bisola. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling great. I am so excited to be here. I'm a bit of a yapper, so I'm always
Yes.
looking for opportunities to speak. So thank you guys for having me.
Love it. Welcome.
Before we go into it, y'all, if you've listened to Moya and I when we've had guests here, we usually give them a quick introduction just so you know kind of who they are. We're also gonna give Basala the chance in the episode to kind of tell you more about herself. But just a quick
Mhm.
introduction. Basala is a licensed marriage and family therapist associate in Texas. So we have American in the house. Uh,
Yes.
Basala, I believe, is a first generation Nigerian American.
Mhm.
And yeah, so she works as a licensed marriage and family therapist associate, where she works primarily with mother-daughter dyads, sexual assault survivors, Generation Z, first generation immigrant populations, and high conflict families. We're so excited to have her on here to shed light on this topic. Um, yeah, and I'm just
So yeah,
excited to see where the conversation leads.
same
Yes.
here. But before we dive into the main segment, because I feel like it's going to be a heavy, somewhat heavy episode, but we wanted to do a check in. We always do, screen time and headlines. It's really a time to check in with ourselves, what we've been up to, what we've been enjoying in the news or content we've been consuming, maybe on TikTok, Instagram, whatever TV shows
Mhm.
you're watching, books we're reading. So I'll give the floor to you, Bisola, as our guest. What is something that you've been enjoying? What have you been up to recently in the past few weeks?
Oh, this is a good question. Okay, so I am a big Real Housewives girl. Like I'm on
Oh,
all the franchises. So y'all know Atlanta came back this year and they were on hiatus for a
hmm
long time. So I have been catching up with all the shenanigans and the mess of it all. I love Kenya. Okay, I'm a Kenya stan, but she acted a fool this season. So I've been like, oh my God, oh my God. So that's what I've kind of been doing for fun.
hmm
But just being a therapist, I'm always reading. So
Mm.
right now I have a lot of
hmm
teen girls on my caseload, and they're just going through it. So I recently picked up like a parenting book,
mm
just so I can better help their parents as I'm working with them. And then I actually started a contract at a women's clinic
Yeah, you're saying.
and they do like STI testing, just all the things, pregnancy testing.
Yeah.
But
hmm
I'm getting trained as a pregnancy decision coach now for these women who are exploring keeping the baby, not keeping the baby, putting up for adoption. So that's been different from my
Mm.
norm, but I'm actually enjoying it while also providing the therapy. So lots of reading material there. But so far, so good.
That's really cool.
Mhm.
I feel like I'm a reality TV show kind of person as well, but I've never got into the Real Housewives franchise before. It just seems, I feel like if I start, I wouldn't be able to stop, but maybe I'll try it one day. We'll see. What about you, Tosan?
My week has been, to be honest, I know, and I don't know if this is a good thing. I kind of blacked out this week. I can't remember half of the
Oh,
things, half of the things that have happened this week. I think, um, and I'm sure y'all are tired of hearing this. I got sick again. The last two episodes when we recorded, I was sick, and then I had a 1 week of bliss in April, and then I was even sick more and worse again.
mm,
There's something in the air, and I don't like it. Um,
same.
but I am feeling so much better. So I think the last couple days I spent just resting. To be honest, I took some time off work, and just resting, resting, resting. That's all I've been doing. In regards to watching anything, I don't think I'm watching anything exciting. I've been looking for like those shows where you watch where you don't have to use any brain power, and it's just like
Mm,
you can play in the background. I've been watching Sweet Magnolias, on
mm,
Netflix,
that show is so
and it's just like it's really background noise, to be honest. That's the only thing I've
fair.
been watching. I don't think I'm reading anything. My brain capacity, she's up to the max lately. So I've not been
Fair.
reading anything. But I think this week has just really been a lot of rest for me. A lot of rest.
Mm.
Um,
Um, that's cool. I think for me, mine is really just I also got sick again in the
oh
month
yeah.
of April. I think it's the weather changing. Like Toronto is very bipolar with its weather sometimes. Like one day or yeah, one day it was snowing, the next day it was sunny and hot, and I was like, okay, cool. So I think the change in weather is really affecting me, but also I started swimming lessons. So I
Oh
think the
yeah.
pool as well is very thank you. I'm very proud. Um but there are kids that come in before my class, so I just know that water is not good for me. Like even if there aren't kids, but like yeah, because sometimes I'm still learning like the basics, right? So I would like consume water, it would go up my nose, everything. So I try to when I come back from the lessons, like take a shower, take like vitamins because I just feel like I've I've taken in a bunch of different germs.
Yeah.
So I feel that's why I'm getting sick. But I'm doing my best. I don't think I'm not watching anything right now. I think I just want to watch a comfort show, and that comfort show to me is This Is Us. I don't know why This Is Us is a comfort show.
It's a very heavy show.
It's a very heavy show, but I just feel comfort whenever I watch it. I don't know why, but I'm on the last season because I just every time I watch it, I learn something new or I see the characters differently. And I think this time I'm like, wow, I really, really like Beth as a person. So think before I would it might be like Randall, but now I'm like, wow, Randall is a little problematic. So I learn something every day whenever or every time I watch the show. But yeah, that has been me.
Well, we're hopefully healthy, and that's also something to be grateful for. I hope everyone
Mm-hmm.
listening to the podcast is doing well. I hope everyone is having a good week, and when you're listening to this, hopefully a restful weekend. um
Mm-hmm.
we say this all the time before I go into the conversation. We do this segment just to catch up, but also to remind people that you can also come catch up with us on Instagram and social media. Let us know how your week has been going. Let us know if you're watching anything. Let us know if you're reading anything. Moya and I are always looking for movie recommendations, book recommendations. I hope everyone is having a good and a blessed week. But into the meat and the bones of why we're here. So before we go
Mm-hmm.
into the topic, preface or like just letting people know again, if you've never listened to us before, Moya and I are also first generation immigrants, but we're
Yeah.
based in Toronto, Canada. And we have an episode. I think it's our second or third
Like,
episode.
yeah.
For
Mm-hmm.
one of our first five episodes where we talk about our immigration story. So you can kind of listen to that, because I think that will give a lot of context to some of the perspectives we're going to have in this conversation. But
Yeah.
Bisola, we're so happy to have you here to continue this conversation with us. Can you let people know again a little bit more about who you are, and what you do?
Yeah, so thank you again. My name is Bisola. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist out of Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas. Um, so that's kind of just like the title, right? Um, official, but I got my bachelor's in psychology from Georgia State University in Atlanta. Then I went on to do my master's in marriage and family therapy in Fort Worth, Texas, at Texas Wesleyan. And yeah, I kind of stumbled into this career, so I never thought, sorry, you guys are gonna see me pushing in my headphones to keep
That's
like
okay.
sliding out.
That's okay.
But um yeah, I did not think I would end up being a marriage and family therapist. Obviously, being Nigerian is doctor, lawyer, engineer. So I kind of
Hmm.
stumbled into this career, but it has been such a blessing and I really, really enjoy doing it. So, as mentioned, I work with kind of a wide range, but my focus is high conflict families, first generation immigrants, and Generation Z. I'll do couples here and there, but couples therapy is really, really hard. Okay. So if you meet
Mm.
most therapists are like couples will wear you out,
Oh
and
man.
it does,
I
but I enjoy
yeah,
it.
I can imagine.
Yes, so I work primarily in private practice. I'm accepting new clients. So if I have listeners in Texas, probably at the end I'll leave information on
Mm,
how you can reach me. I do
Hmm.
individuals, couples, and family in private practice primarily. And then, of course, contracted now with a women's clinic where I'll be doing some more nonprofit and agency work, which is super exciting. But that's kind of the zhuzh. Nigerian American
Hmm.
through and through. I love
yes.
being both.
Yes.
I love
And yeah.
that. No,
Mhm.
thanks for the intro. I hope this has given people a bit more detail as to who you are and where they can also, or if they want to also be on the same journey that you're on and like a path on this career path that you're on as well. But I think it's really cool to see Black women in um these spaces because we've had some of our guests have been therapists as well and like self-care and like wellness coaches in this
Mm,
space. So it's really good to always see Black women in spaces like this. But when it comes to trauma, this topic, I feel like people don't talk about immigration and trauma in the same light.
mm,
And I feel like immigration is something that does cause, even if it's not, even if it's something that people actually strive for to like move countries and that's something that they desire, there's still trauma in some in one way or another that could be post trauma, it could be before, could be during. But I think this segment of the episode, we wanted to talk about how immigration can affect people's upbringing, how they see the world, how it affects their mental health or lack thereof. So I think my first question would be, how can immigration cause trauma to people's upbringing? Because for myself, I grew up in Nigeria. I was born and raised there and
mm,
then moved here when I was 15. I moved to Canada. And I think it affected me in some way because I think 15, your teens is like the most pivotal time of your life
yeah.
and how you're like building your identity, you're stressed, you're like, I'm a teenager, am I growing boobs yet? I was like, as a woman as well, I'm like going through puberty and then like my parents are away. So like what are, from your perspective and even your experience, how can immigration sort of cause trauma in people's upbringing?
Yeah, I think this is a great question because there's just always this assumption that immigration is such like a fairy tale kind of like,
Mhm.
of course, like I moved to America, I
Yeah.
moved to
Of
Canada. Life
JAPA.
is just it's really not as glamorous as
Mhm.
people make it out to be. And I think also people are not really honest about a lot of times like I think especially for Nigerians, there's it's hard for us to conceptualize like going to the Western world and then being sad about it.
Mm,
Or just not
Mm.
having like
Exactly.
a great experience. If you call home and you're like, yeah, I'm in America and it sucks and I hate it here, everyone's gonna be like, why? How?
Wow.
How
Mhm.
come? Because of like
Exactly.
they won't probably won't even allow you to say that. Honestly, they'll be like,
Exactly.
God forbid, or I'm not trying to
Mhm.
hear that.
Mhm.
You know, we're studying it out in Nigeria, so you need to be grateful. So
Exactly.
I think for one, developmentally, anytime children need their parents to help them learn how to emotionally regulate.
mm,
So that we call that like
Mhm.
co-regulation. And honestly, teens, right now, my teens are showing me Pepper in the therapy room because there's just so much
mm,
happening. Like you mentioned, like hormones, your body is changing. the world is looking at you as an adult
Yeah.
because you're growing into an adult body, but your
Yep.
mentality is still that of a child.
Mm-hmm.
And I think kids need help growing through that. So for a lot of people who are coming by themselves with no parents or no adult figure or a mentor, that's really
Yeah.
challenging. I think also when we talk about immigration, people don't talk about the grief around it a lot of times
Yeah.
too, and that's like what we would call like a disenfranchised grief. And I always say once you get on the grief train, you don't really come off of it because there's
Mm-hmm.
always, even as you're going by your day to day, you'll see something that reminds you of that pain
Mm-hmm.
or that loss. And something like immigration is such as I mentioned, a disenfranchised grief because it's almost like a grief that we don't have a name for.
Mm.
Like if someone died, yeah, we can talk about like obviously you're grieving. If your house burned down in a fire, in LA we had all those
Yeah.
fires, losing your home, those are like big things that we can see that someone is grieving. But when we talk about like leaving your country of origin, people kind of are like, well, it's not like you shouldn't be sad,
Yeah.
right? Like you wanted to come here, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then there's still like the grief even through that. And then also, I think coming from a country of mostly Black people, now you're here
Mm-hmm.
with a bunch of different races, and the experience is so
Yeah.
different.
Mm-hmm.
Not saying that we don't understand racism in Nigeria or things like that. We obviously do,
Yeah.
but it's so different than
It's so
coming here and
different.
then
Yeah.
it's in your
Yeah.
face.
Mm-hmm.
That in and of itself, those are traumatic experiences that we're not really well prepared for, and then we're not really equipped with how do I come out of that? I have this
Mm-hmm.
experience. How do I keep moving forward? How do I regulate my emotions? When it happens, we don't have the tools to really
Mm.
handle it.
Yeah.
So that's just off top of my head, some things
I
that
like
came to
that you
mind.
mentioned grief, because that's not something that I necessarily, it was never really a word I ever attached to my immigration story, because especially
Mm.
when
Same.
you grow up aspiring to actually leave the country. So when you are in a country that has created systems that made your life so difficult that, like, since you were young, all people look to is everybody's looking for when they want to japa, when they want to leave, when
Mm-hmm.
they when they want to, like, you've grown up with that desire.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not only until I became like more of an adult now, 10 years into my experience in my immigration journey, that you start to realize that there is a lot of grief of the life that you could have had if you were able to not only live in your country of origin, but also like live and exist in your culture as naturally as you come. Um,
Mm.
there is a lot of, I think we're having, I don't know which conversation we're having, Moya, lately we're talking about code switching. I think we're talking about friendships and like building friendships
Yeah.
in Canada, and having to integrate
Mm-hmm.
with people who are not like Nigerian. And even though we've been
Mm-hmm.
away from Nigeria for 10 years plus, there is still a lot about yourself and who you are as a person, especially if you grew up in a different country, that you kind of water down and you reshape. And so it
Mm-hmm.
feels like you slowly have to say goodbye to who you are fully to assimilate into new
Mm-hmm.
cultures,
Yeah.
which is not necessarily a terrible thing per se. But when you start having conversations with people back home, it's almost like now we're doing oppression Olympics. Who is
Yeah.
suffering
Who's
more?
suffering more?
Uh,
Yeah.
More.
And it's like, it's not helping
yeah,
anyone,
who's suffering
truly.
more? And I think we wanted to have this conversation because we want to break this stigma, of, although immigration is such a blessing for a lot of people, it is life saving. It literally saves people's lives.
Yeah.
And it changes the course and gives you more opportunities. There's still a lot of trauma that you will have to deal with for the rest of your life. There
Mm-hmm.
is a grief of the life that you could have had. Um, and this is it's a grief of like a sense of self, of
Mm-hmm.
who, like how you can fully exist in your natural spaces if you were in a different country or your country of origin. So I'd like that you bring out that grief component because that's not something that I even ever thought about until more recently.
Mm-hmm.
But I also wanted to talk more on, like, get your opinion on more about ways it affects mental health. I think mental health is a more complicated conversation, especially in the African community and also a lot of communities outside North America and some parts of Europe. I think just mental health on its own is a very complex conversation to kind of break down and explain to people, especially from people who come from regions like we do, or have origins from regions
Mhm.
like we do. But in regards to immigration, from your clientele or like your experience, what have you seen um, as direct impacts on people's mental health as a result of immigration?
Yeah, I actually love this question. Because obviously being Nigerian, a lot of my clients are Nigerian or West African.
Mm,
They seek me out because of my name. Um, and so a lot of times the way I practice therapy, I do a lot of like family of origin. So I want to know how you grew up, what messages did you receive about yourself and yourself
mm,
in the world based on where you grew up. So I have like a very contextual framework, and I love tracking like ages. So when is the first time you felt this? When is the first time you felt that? Oh, how
mm,
old were you? A lot of times it's around the time they moved.
mm,
And it doesn't even necessarily have to be like leaving family of origin. Like I had a client of recent talk about when she moved to a different
mm,
state, and even that alone, like the trauma of just moving to a different state, not
mm,
even, a different country.
Mhm.
So I think in terms of mental health, um, well, one, there's the grief, right? And if you do not learn how to, I don't even want to say manage grief because, like I mentioned earlier, it's something you kind of you live with,
mm.
so you learn how to live through
Yeah.
it. If you don't have those skills, that can really turn into major depressive disorder. Like or you could be in a chronic state of low mood. And obviously there are physical manifestations as well. Um, so I think about that a lot. And I think also like Nigerians, we grow up in such a culture of secrecy. So I've had so many clients mention like, oh, I didn't know we were moving. Like my parents said that we're going on holiday,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and then we just never
And
went
then they
back to
never come
Nigeria.
back. Yeah. Mhm.
And
That
I
was
think like I think for especially for young people like children, that experience alone, relationships or the way we come to understand that we're safe in the world is like transparency, openness, it's reliability,
Mm,
predictability. So when you just tell a kid like, "Oh yeah, we're going on holiday," you lie essentially,
yeah.
and then they never go back home. You're like ripping safety away from them and up
Hmm.
under them.
Yeah. That's true.
So I noticed too. It's interesting how that like lack of safety turns into like certain coping behaviors. Um, and I don't know because I don't know how deep into the nitty gritty we're
Give us
gonna
all you
go.
got.
You know,
Um,
yes.
but I see that as when there's like an insecurity there, you never know what's gonna happen. Things seem so unpredictable. We find ourselves trying to control. So now you're
Mm.
perfectionistic, you're high achieving because however you can hold on to
Yeah.
security and safety, you're gonna do it, even in ways
Mhm.
that are maladaptive, essentially. So I think one impact on mental health is your safety is
Mm,
gone a lot of times. Even just moving to a different environment, you have to cultivate a new sense of safety. That's really challenging, especially when there's not a lot of guidance.
mm,
And I think you can source out information to help with immigration, but you never know what you're gonna get.
yeah.
You don't know what your experience is gonna be until you actually live
Yeah.
it. So there's only so
Mhm.
much preparation that can be done. And so I think there's always gonna be insecurity that comes out of that. And then of course the stress there's on your family unit
Mm,
if you're,
Yep.
dealing with family far away, or even maybe even sometimes living with family you've never met. You know how many Nigerians send their children to some faraway auntie? You don't know if that
Mhm.
person's gonna abuse this child. Like
yep.
you don't, you just
You
don't
really don't
know.
know.
And so I think that too causes a lot of mental health challenges. But I
Mhm.
see a lot of anxiety, I think more than anything
Yeah.
the depression and anxiety, but high functioning
Yeah.
depression
Hmm.
and anxiety because we're Nigerians, we're hustlers.
Yep.
We're gonna
Yes.
get it. We're gonna make something happen. So a lot of times it's
Mhm.
high functioning depression and anxiety because of all these things I listed and some other challenges as well.
Just curious, have you seen any positive impact on mental health as a
Mhm.
result of immigration?
I think in a lot of ways, yeah. I actually had a client who survived a civil war in her
Oh
family or
wow.
in her country of origin. So of course, you less physical insecurity. You
Mm-hmm.
you come to another country, you're gonna be safer here physically. So I think in that way, yeah, in that way, there are benefits,
Yeah.
right? But she definitely still struggled with some of just the negative emotions. But in a lot of ways, like you all mentioned earlier, immigration is great. It
Yeah.
can save your life. Maybe there's financial stability there, there's your education. I think a lot of times too, moving is just good for you to be in a new space, meet new
Mm-hmm.
people, exchange new ideas,
Mm,
which a lot of time, even just the connections you make, I always say like we are hurt in relationship, but we also heal in relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it is the fresh faces or the new people who show you a different way of being, who show you a different or who expand the possibilities
yeah.
for your life. Or you can see through a different lens that wow, like life can actually get better.
Mm,
The life I knew might have been good or maybe not good, but it can also be even better.
yeah.
So I
Mm-hmm.
think in those ways there are a lot of positives there.
Yeah. And I think um that I wanted to put the highlight the positives too, because I think that that can also be challenging, like that constant disconnect of you feeling super grateful for like the financial stability, the educational opportunities, but you're like,
Mm-hmm.
because when I moved, I'm like, I have a lot of opportunities that my parents never I've had when they were growing up, so I'm very grateful for my experience of being here. But at the same time, I was experiencing more anxiety than I've ever experienced in my entire life. And that
Yep.
disconnect, um, I think is something that I wanted to highlight, because I don't want to make it seem like, oh my God, it's only going to be like negative. There are, again, like
Yeah.
we've said multiple times, there are a lot of positive things about immigration. But I also think to remind people that look at it so glamorously, like it is also not all positive. There is
Yeah.
definitely some negative effects on that. So I'm glad that like you clarified that.
Yeah, most
Yeah.
definitely.
And
I think, well, part of my job as therapist too is helping my clients put language to their emotions.
Mm,
So I think in a lot of ways, immigration is bittersweet.
mm,
And what is bittersweet? It's literally just a mixture of sadness and
mm,
joy. And that's okay. We can have both. I don't think they have to be mutually exclusive.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, I definitely agree. It's always good to look at the positives.
yeah,
especially with especially coming from countries where mental health isn't really talked about, I feel like if they migrate to countries like Western countries, so like America, Canada, whatever,
mm,
they have more language. So to echo your point of just having verbiage, I feel like in Nigeria, we have therapy and it's becoming more and more popular. And I feel like my parents are even more receptive to the word depression, because before they would see it as like a you're just depressed right now because like you're sad because of the situation, oh like it's fine, right, versus like a mental illness. And I think immigration like they don't see how a lot of Nigerians don't see how immigration can affect mental health in a
mm,
negative way, because it's like the whole point of immigration is so you can be better and so you can leave whatever issues and struggles you're
mm,
going through in Nigeria. And so once you move, it's good. But I feel like immigration can honestly affect, I think it's the experiences that then cause those negative emotions. But
mm,
I think the other thing that we wanted to talk about was being a third culture kid, because now some people, I was speaking to someone yesterday and they had told me how they had just moved countries at a really young age, multiple countries. And I think that was really shocking to me, because I was like, oh my gosh, are you okay? Because I feel like, how does it make you view the world? How do you see yourself? Like, what is your identity? Because for me, I'm like, oh, I grew up in Nigeria from 1 to 15, or like 0 to 15 years. And then I came here. And so that's my life. Like, I can't imagine having to now like immigrate so many different times, because now I think I have two lenses of how I see the world. I grew up in Nigeria. I see the world in that sense, and then growing up here and experiencing some things outside of the country, like I have two lenses. So being a like third generational kid, like you have Nigerian parents, but then when you go back, it's not as like you don't feel like an authentic, or for myself, I don't feel like an authentic Nigerian in some ways. But when I'm around Canadians, especially if they're white Canadians, I feel very out of place. So I think my question to you is, how can immigration sort of affect um people's view on the world as those kind of kids or multicultural identities?
Yeah, I think it is it's challenging because it's like, where do I place myself? And
Mm-hmm.
I think like we as humans, as people, we have this like innate desire for belonging. I
Yeah.
find that a lot of us who are like multicultural by way of immigration, or just even having parents from another country and then growing up in the Western world, we are constantly having to fit in. And fitting in and belonging are not the same. They're
Mm,
actually not.
Mm.
Fitting in, it comes from a place of insecurity. Um, Whereas belonging, you know that you feel connected almost. So
mm-hmm.
I find that like with a lot of my clients, and even for myself, having that experience, because I would go back and forth between Nigeria and here.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I think that was challenging for me, kind of like when I was in Nigeria, they're looking at me that like this American.
Yeah.
Then when I come back here, they're looking at me at like this African, this
Yeah.
Nigerian.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always like, why can't I just be both? And I think that's what
Mm-hmm.
it is really is how do we just accept that we can be multifaceted and that like is it by force to choose one? Can I just
Mm.
be both? I think the
Makes
world,
sense. Yeah.
yeah, the world asks us to pick one because then it's easier to kind of place
Mm-hmm.
someone. But we even know as Black people, we're not a monolith.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think, especially, not to call out the white people, but a lot of people who are not black might see, a girl that's brown skin with long hair and like, oh my gosh, she looks just like Beyonce. She really
She
doesn't.
really
She
doesn't.
really doesn't. She really does. She actually doesn't.
No.
Or any girl with some big curly hair, she looks like
Mm-hmm.
SZA or something. No, she doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times I think the world, it's just easier to classify everyone
Mm.
as one thing.
Yeah.
People really struggle to make space um for just us being multifaceted and
Yeah.
multicultural. I think I definitely had that challenge. And honestly, the day I just decided that I'm just gonna be both. I am Nigerian and American. And I can just be both and I love being both. And I've even had an argument with myself, like if you had to like trade one, could you do it? And I don't think I could. And so also just accepting myself, and I found that when I was able to do that, then it was so much easier to belong instead of fitting in. Like
Mm.
when I was amongst Nigerians, I felt like I had to just be super Nigerian. And no, I don't speak
Mm-hmm.
Pidgin just off, like it just doesn't roll off my tongue. No, my
Mm-hmm.
Yoruba is not perfect, and that's okay. And when I'm
Mm-hmm.
around Americans, I felt like, I have to make sure that my diction is just what it needs to be. And maybe they shouldn't call me Bisola. Maybe they should call me my Christian name or something easier. And I had to kind of
Mm-hmm.
reconcile with that. Like, I'm just gonna be me,
Yeah.
which is
Mm-hmm.
both, and I can enjoy that. But I think it's also challenging because our parents don't make it easier. You
Mm-hmm.
find a lot of Nigerian parents expecting this clearly not 100% Nigerian kid to meet up to all these cultural
Mm.
expectations.
Yeah.
Okay, so why didn't you just leave them in Nigeria? That was the expectation. You can't have
Yeah.
both.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it's really creating space for people to just be as they are and celebrating that. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
actually okay. Mhm.
And to be honest, I do agree is once you start, because although society kind of gives a guide of how they want you to show up, once you start showing up as you are, people are not gonna have a choice than to just take it for what it is. And I think a lot of the conflict is also, although I don't want to downplay societal impact, I think a lot of conflict is also just an internal conflict of how do I want to show up? I feel like I have to pick one. And so I like the idea of just reconciling with yourself. I'm both. Either both. I'm all three. I'm all four, depending on how many cultures you have mixed in there. Um, and realizing that you don't have to necessarily play a part to be something. And the conversation we're going to be having after this episode comes out, we're actually talking about Moy and I are talking about cultural identities, and
Mm-hmm.
the title of the episode is "Are We Nigerian Enough?" Um, and just coming to realize that it's not like I'm not here for an acting gig. I'm not here to convince you or play a part of like this is how Nigerians could be. Um, as long as existing as authentically to my experiences, you're gonna have to
Mm-hmm.
take me as I am. Um, and I think it's easier said than done. Especially
Yeah.
because a lot of people, as human beings and as social beings, we always want to fit in and we want to. Um, but I think kind of reconciling that internally, like you said, does defeat a lot of the struggle because then you just show up
Mm-hmm.
authentically as yourself. But something else that
Mhm.
you mentioned that I wanted to go back to you is family, immigration, and like just the
Mm-hmm.
family unit. Um, I think that aside from who you are and how you show up in your society, in your new society, um, immigration does put a strain on family dynamics and definitely complicates family dynamics. From things like parentification and like moving to a country where you are now either more educated than your parents, and so you're gonna have to be making a lot of people are gonna start looking to you based on your accolades and your degrees, and people are going to start looking to you to take lead in places where you're not supposed to be taking the lead as a kid, but also to like black tax, but also to like losing connection with your family members and boundaries. I really want to talk about how you think immigration affects like the family, especially the nuclear family unit.
Okay, so your family is a system. Anytime you take one person out of the system
Yeah,
changes. And so if we think about immigration, like you're taking a key player out. So a lot of times you're going to now start to see conflict because it's like, how do we do family? How do we do our lives without this key player being
yeah,
there? The system is gonna change and it's gonna find another use for that. I think there are challenges there too um because of the distance, like a lot of your family back home, they just don't know what you're even
yeah,
experiencing. So there's that lack of knowledge. When there's no understanding, it's hard to be empathetic.
yeah,
And I think a lot of resentment is grown or can brew, especially because if we're being real, it's not like everybody decided that they were going to immigrate. The parents decided that. Did they even ask you, do you want to
yeah.
leave? Maybe you didn't want to leave. I've had a lot of clients say like, "Oh my gosh, my life was better in Nigeria. How can I be living
Let's
high
talk
class?"
about that because a lot of people think it's impossible to think your life was better back home. But
Hmm.
there are a lot of things about now Nigeria is a very complicated society, but there's a lot of things
Hmm.
about back home that is still so much better. And
Hmm.
people can't conceptualize that. That is a that's a thing.
Exactly. So I found that like a lot of my clients will say like I was living well in Nigeria,
Mm,
like we had money, everything was fine, and now I'm here and I'm kind of a brokey. And I think that alone too, now you guys have a change in class.
yeah,
Maybe your family is living fine in Nigeria and you're a brokey here. That alone causes tension. And
Mm-hmm.
then they're also expecting you will send me these dollars back home because US dollar obviously is going to carry more weight in
yeah,
Nigeria, but I don't even really have it to give. So I think there's a lot of just conflict. That's not even necessarily like, well, I'll say this. I'll say the behaviors are rooted in other things that we could go into and process, but I think that they just get exposed in a new way
mm,
through immigration. So it's likely a lot of these challenges existed before you moved, but moving obviously it like gives like a pedestal to where you can really see these things working out. But anytime there's a big shift or a change, relationships can really suffer if you guys haven't developed skills to, I guess, develop skills that will make your relationship, I don't want to say like bulletproof, but relationships are going to have problems. But a
yeah,
lot of times we don't even have skills to even
Mm-hmm.
manage like the conflicts when they do arise. Um, I find that a lot of children, I'll say children in context,
mm,
right? Assuming your parents are back in Nigeria, a lot of the kids who are here have like a lot of pent-up resentment.
yeah,
Um, like I didn't want to go. You sent me here. You sent me here with no help. I've heard so many complain like my dad stopped paying my school fees after the first
Oh
year.
wow.
Now
Mm-hmm.
I'm just here in
Mm-hmm.
this country like where am I supposed to get this money
Yeah.
from?
Yeah.
Like it's really hard. So there's a lot of resentment, and I think the parents too are like, well, why are you mad? Like I
Like I did
suggested this
this for
because I
you.
thought it would make your life
Yeah.
better, or it did, so
Exactly.
you should just be grateful. And then in our culture, respect your
Oh
elders.
God.
You can't talk
You
if
can
even
talk
if you
back.
just want to explain how you're feeling. Oh yeah, you're talking back. So
Mm-hmm.
we're mates now,
Uh-huh.
and that just makes it even harder.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just interesting. I think that I don't know. I think the kiddos have a lot of resentment.
Mm.
And I mean, I'm not a parent, so I can't speak for the parents, but I think even listening to my parents, sometimes it would seem as if the kids are
Yeah.
ungrateful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I think we can cut parents some slack. I think everyone just has their different emotions, and we have to just be okay with people having expressions of that without necessarily taking it so personal,
Yeah. And
if
I
that
was
makes
gonna, I was
sense.
even gonna say is because I do think, especially I wouldn't, I'm not a parent, so I would never know the decision of seeing how life is going in the country and being like, I want my children to have better and make a decision that they think at that moment is the best decision. But at the same time,
Yeah.
as a kid who that decision was, when that decision is made and you move, I still understand the complication. I think what also makes it more difficult, especially, and we can only speak more from the Nigerian culture just because that's the culture that we're from.
What we know.
We don't really
Mm-hmm.
have a culture that allows for open communication and for people to have honest conversations about how things are going. And I think it worsens the trauma that comes from immigration because I'm not gonna lie, and I think I have like pretty linear and open parents, but I don't even think I had it in me for the first couple of years that I moved here to call my parents and be like, "Oh my god, it's difficult. I hate it here," because there's not that stream of communication that's already established in the family unit. And that doesn't come from immigration. That just comes from the complex way our culture sets up families that you can't go
Mm-hmm.
back to your parents and be like, hey, this is what I'm struggling with. Um, because I think that that will make it so much easier because then you can now have conversations. How can we support you better? Or how can,
Mm-hmm.
but all those things can't come if we don't even talk about, and which is why we want to have this conversation is if we are not talking about the struggles and like what's difficult, then people don't know how to support you or how to make the experience a little bit more manageable because obviously we can't necessarily take the trauma away. The Western
Mm-hmm.
world is a it's a rat race. There's always going to be trauma somewhere, but I think the complexity of how our culture designs family units makes the immigration experience even more harder because then there is no um place to just fully bear your emotions and like the struggles that you're experiencing. um so with saying all this, how can we fix, we'll go to immigration in general, but how can we fix this cycle in our family units? Like where do we start from, especially with talking to our parents and like having conversations about immigration?
Yeah, I think that the challenge a lot of times oh, lies with the kids, I'll say. And when I'm referring to
Mm,
kids, not that we're children, but
yeah.
assuming that we're talking about our parents and
Mm-hmm.
we are the
Mm-hmm.
ones who have immigrated here, I'm always having to explain to my clients that if your parent is 50 years old plus, do you really think they're just going to change magically?
Mm,
That's true.
Like the
That's all they've
culture,
known.
their way of thinking, it's a very big ask. So how do you love them and accept them? Because I think people are always like they need to change. No, you need to change. Like you cannot control whether your parents are going to understand you or
mm,
not. I
Mm-hmm.
think that it's our responsibility. Like, how do I still be okay if they never change?
mm,
I still want to have a relationship with them, but
Mm-hmm.
how do I still be okay? So a lot of times, like, I will have my clients write out a list of their characteristics of their parents or whoever it is. Now, a lot of times it's the negative characteristics, not saying there's amazing
mm,
characteristics, but if your mom is opinionated, a bad listener, impulsive, harsh, whatever it is, right? Do you really think discussing all of these challenges with her is going to, like, what are you expecting her to do? If you've already listed all the ways that she's gonna struggle with receiving this, and not saying that, parents can't do better, but that's just the reality. We can't force them to do differently. So I think a lot of times, like even for myself, I kind of had to learn like what is a good conversation to have with my mom, and what does she have the capacity to handle
Mm.
with my dad, and then where do I create community with people who I know can help me like with this burden or
Yeah.
whatever I'm going through. Because some things, unfortunately, parents are not going to meet all of our expectations just because they're not perfect. And I think a lot of times we have this fantasy of what parents should be like, especially now when you come to the Western world, you see these white people, they don't spank their kids. You see, oh, they parents out and the parents are just taking it and listening.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes those are just age appropriate expressions for teenagers. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're disrespectful or
Mm.
not, a good
Mm-hmm.
kid. But in our culture, absolutely, if
Absolutely
your
not.
expression of emotion is not positive, then
Get
don't
wrap it up.
save it. Exactly. So I think a lot of times too, we'll then start like comparing, well, how come these people. Unfortunately, that is not the reality for a lot of us. So I think some of it is acceptance and gratitude for all of the great things our parents have done for us, recognizing what they have capacity for and what they don't have capacity
Mm.
for, and a lot of forgiveness work, which I know is such a buzzword, but a lot of my so angry and my family and they don't understand. Okay, well, you still have to do the next thing. So are you going to be angry forever or can we work on forgiveness and then maybe create boundaries around how you interact with your family? If your family is constantly asking for money and you don't have it, what is it that you're doing that is allowing them to assume that this is okay?
Mm.
Meaning that maybe it is having a conversation. And I think people think setting boundaries, you have to explain what you're doing. You actually don't. A simple, I don't have it right now. Oh, I'm so sorry, I can't make it. And you can find a way to end the conversation. I think a lot of times we start the people pleasing, we start acquiescing because that's how we've grown up. But the way you change is by consistently doing things that are hard too.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes saying no to your mom is going to be challenging. Maybe that's what you're going to have to do. Now, do you need to have the back and forth with her? Not necessarily. We can work on ways to disengage respectfully. But I think the ask is what can I do,
Mm.
not what they can do. And then once you're able to do that, you'll actually see naturally relationship patterns will change. Um, and so I'm always encouraging my clients with that. I'm not saying that our parents cannot change. They absolutely can. However, we shouldn't go in with the expectation that they will
Mm.
change because we can't control that. But I think as you make changes in yourself in the way that you interact with them, you will find that their interactions will change over
Mm.
time. Like I remember my mom and I, and that's why I love mother-daughter therapy. It was horrible. We did not have a great relationship. I can say that now because we've worked on it and we're doing much better. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I would say we worked on it. I really had to change and let go of a lot of things to change the way I showed up in my relationship with her. So now when I call her and I'm like, hey, mommy, I want to talk to you about something and I just need you to listen, she's actually okay. Or once she starts doing the talking too much, I can actually
Mm-hmm.
recognize when she's like, oh, okay, this is
Oh.
not what she
Mm-hmm.
needs.
Yeah.
And she's starting to get it. But that's because I changed first. So it's actually our responsibility to be um, if you want to see change in your relationships, you have to change.
Mm.
You have to work on that.
That's interesting. I feel like it's an interesting take to not like we're putting the onus on us because that's what it sounds like, but I think what it really is we can't change people. We can only control so much and we have agency over how we react to
Mm.
things. So I think that's the point that I'm
Hmm.
getting from your explanation at least. So if people are listening, like, oh, you want me to, I have a really bad relationship with like my dad, for example. Like what why is it me? Like he's the one at fault. But I think it's how does his, I guess, reaction or like relationship or maybe lack thereof affects you, and how can you just let go of it? Okay, I don't think I see this man as this anymore, let me just realign my expectations.
Mm.
um I think boundaries is something that, n- like in the Nigerian culture, we don't have at all. It's just very all over the place. Like I'm your mom, I'm your dad, so you're obligated to take care of me when I'm retired. Or there is, oh, you've moved to a different country, so you're obligated to send me allowance because you have a better life.
Mm.
So, quote unquote, because you're now in a Western country and you don't have all these systems that are holding you back. Or even like parentification and all of that, it's very, it happens even without immigration in some way. But then with immigration, you said, Bisola, like some people are just left to take care of themselves, and now they have to like start figuring out tuition fees that
Did it-
they didn't want to come to this school. So why am I now like why do I now have to pay the bills? And it's just, it's a lot with like family unit. And then there's also like there's there's some dynamics where, you know, the issues are not as glaring in your face. It could just be like a lack of connection. You're like, oh, I see my family once a year and I'm good. And you're like, wow, I actually don't have like
Connection.
a tangible connection with these people that I call family and I call blood. And then you're forced to make um chosen family with like friends and things like that. So I think it's really interesting, but I feel like we've talked about all the difficulties and everything. And I know you started talking about how people can start making changes with the family unit, but in terms of just immigration in general, if people are struggling with their mental health or struggling with how they view themselves, how they view the world, how what are some ways that people can cope if they're struggling with any sort of trauma related to immigration?
Yeah, well, obviously I'm a therapist, so I'm always an advocate for therapy, but I also
Of course.
realize that it's not
It's not.
super accessible to
Mm-hmm.
everyone, and that's just the reality. And also my Nigerian clients too. I don't think I've shared this, but a lot of times our first few sessions is like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm in therapy. And even just having to like help them get comfortable and like it's actually okay
It's okay. Yeah.
to admit that you're not okay and then seek
Mm-hmm.
out help. So a lot of times I even find them like resistant to the therapeutic process
Mm-hmm.
because it's just not what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a barrier that would stop a lot of us from obviously like seeking help. But I think therapy, even if you're not going through like something as dramatic as immigration, it's a great avenue for
Mm-hmm.
working these things out. But I also think and the reason, as you mentioned, like I I'm not trying to encourage like the onus has to be completely on us. But one thing that we do whenever we say people can't do this, people don't show up in this way, we're also negating responsibility from ourselves.
100%.
And
Yeah.
relationship is two to tango, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
so I do think when you move to another country, the beauty of it, as we talked about some of the positives, is that you are isolated to where you can come to understand who you are outside of the context of your family. Because
Mm-hmm.
your family is a part of you, but it's not you. You still get to, especially, as you're moving from, well, we're women here, so I'll say girl to woman. But as you're growing from child to adult, that's literally what it is becoming differentiated out of your
Yeah.
family and developing your own sense of
Yeah.
self. So I always encourage like journaling. There
Mm-hmm.
are amazing journal prompts you can find literally anywhere. Even ChatGPT.
Even
If you ask,
girl,
if
that's
you
my
ask,
girl.
if you ask AI to give you some inner child reparenting journal prompts or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, AI will.
Yeah.
So I would say get curious about your experience. Like this is like what is this? How is this? Not even necessarily why, but how? How under what ways does this happen? I also say community too, just because as I mentioned, like we are hurt in relationship, but you will heal in relationship.
Mm.
I think that a lot of times because we talked about like the grief around immigration and the struggles, like people will sometimes like shame you for feeling sad about immigrating. So people are
Yeah.
already there's like an aversion to talking about it because we don't create a lot of safety around the
Yeah.
conversations.
Mm-hmm.
But I always tell people church or wherever your place of worship, even like you can find groups for like
Mm.
Nigerians in
Yeah.
wherever, people
Totally.
in whoever, or wherever, right? And seek out community because we were meant to be in relationship. Um, and you just never know who you're going to meet and who's going to um, provide that like sense of comfort. I think I always encourage calling home, but in safety. So if you already have a bad relationship, we need to kind of create safety and equip you with skills to when you do call home, you're not left like regretting it, but you know how to
Yeah.
manage through. But I would always say, like, in as much as immigration can be challenging, there's also a beauty of being able self-discovery, trying new things, journaling, and discovering who you are outside of your family, outside of your country of origin. Um, because you're not it's a part of you, but it's not you in totality. Like we're
Yeah.
Nigerian, yes, but there's so much more to us than being Nigerian.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
We're women, yeah, but there's so much more to us than just being women. So I think
Mm-hmm.
there's always opportunity to learn and become curious about that.
Yeah.
No,
I
and
like that. I like the sorry, I was just gonna say I like not making your like your identity be like your entire personality because some people just like yeah like I have I don't know I'm Nigerian and so that's all I know and that's all I am so being curious versus making it like your end all be all but yeah sorry.
yeah, and like I also think that something that stood out to me, and I think something that was very helpful to me in my own and coping with immigration and my own immigration journey is finding community. Um, and a lot of that community will have to be self-built and outside of your family, unfortunately. Um,
Yeah.
I think that there is, and this is also why spaces like this podcast exist, but there is a beauty of existing with people who are going through something similar because then it helps you create safe spaces to talk about one, your struggles, but then there's also a beauty of finding um community with people who even aren't like going through the same exact struggle and have
Mm-hmm.
wisdom from their own shared experience and how they exist in their own um lived experience that might be helpful to you. One thing I will say, for example, in regards to family unit, what we're talking about in family unit, something that's been very helpful for me dealing with my family. I'm not saying that I'm adopting the white man behavior, but when you exist in spaces where they don't have the same cultural construct like we do when it comes to family, and I would never be for
Mm-hmm.
disrespect. Obviously, I think you should always engage with people respectfully, but when you see people when you're in close community with seeing how people set boundaries with their families, where they're in cultures where they don't actually struggle with setting boundaries, you learn from those habits. And you
Mm-hmm.
learn to adopt some skills that might be helpful in dealing with your own experience. So aside from family unit, there's just a lot of things in moving around the world, like learning how to file my taxes and like
Oh,
learning job application in the system and my sin numbers and
Mm-hmm.
all these things that make immigration hard. Existing in community with other people that may not have the same life experience with you can also be very helpful because it equips you with new tools that you might have not grown up with to be able to succeed in this new environment. So community with people who are going through something similar, but also community with other people is very helpful. I know you
Yeah.
mentioned like church and like online groups. Is there any other tips that you can give for people who are looking to build community, especially to help with
yeah,
immigration?
most definitely. I before I even get to that, I do wanna. I think what you said is so good because, especially as immigrants, we tend to hang out with our
Mm,
people. So most
American, yeah,
Nigerians, all their friends are Nigerians. Maybe they have a
Yeah.
few work
yeah.
friends who are from somewhere
Mm-hmm.
else, and not saying that that's not good. We definitely should have community with ourselves, but most of the people that you're going to really learn from that are going to stretch your thinking are not going to be people that look like you. Like if
Yeah.
we're a group of three black women, it is going to be probably not our same gender and probably not our same race that's really going to
Mm-hmm.
be able to expand the way we think and see
Yeah.
things. So I think what you said is beautiful. I always say you should have someone that you're pouring into. So maybe someone you're mentoring, maybe someone back in Nigeria or wherever you're from who wants to
Mm,
move that you can encourage or kind of help them through someone kind of going along in your journey with you, and then maybe even a mentor, someone who's ahead of you or who you aspire to be like, so that you're pouring in, you're doing it with someone, you have someone pouring into you. I think that definitely helps the journey
Yeah.
through. Um, but aside from those like social groups and online groups, I think people, especially like I think Nigerians, we don't try new things. So, the guys love playing soccer together
Yeah.
because that's what we do. But if there's anything that you're so curious about that we don't necessarily do in Nigeria, this is the time to try it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
how else to try it? So I think
Mhm.
like we have to be able to do things afraid. Like
Mhm.
even you mentioning that you're doing swimming, Moyo, I thought is like
Mhm.
amazing because most Black people can't swim, and most
Yeah.
of us is not gonna go like be vulnerable like that and be like, I can't
Mhm.
swim and then go to classes or lessons
Yeah.
somewhere. I
Mhm.
think I think that is like amazing and should be applauded. So I would also just encourage people like just do things that you normally wouldn't have done. Like
Mhm.
you only have one life, you might go and realize, I don't really like that, but you'll find something else, and you never know what type of community is going to come out of that too. So I think sometimes we limit community to like people who look like us or who
Yeah.
just do the same things that we do, and that's just not. I would say it's not a bad mentality, but I will challenge us to change the way we see
Mm.
community building for sure.
Oh, 100%. I really liked what you said in terms of the people who will really help you the most are people who most of the time are not the ones in your community. I was reading this book called I think Your 20s or some I think How to Make the Most of Your 20s was the book. And it was essentially talking about how to network, and it's the people who are like second degree like friendships or someone's acquaintance that connects you to like a potential job opportunity. It's not people in your circle that will take you to the places that you really want to go, because if you think about it, most of the time everyone in your circle, you guys are sort of going through the same thing, versus having someone who is maybe a couple years ahead of you, or they're Nigerian but maybe they've been in the country longer, and they've been through a bunch of different like issues. Maybe they knew how to set up their social insurance number and then they show you how to do it, versus like someone who just moved to the country with you while both of you don't know anything. So I think it's really important to build community with people who also don't look like you, like even with like experiencing things like church or like whatever place of worship people go to. I think it's interesting to see people who aren't Nigerian and going to like at least once and seeing what that looks like and how people express themselves, who aren't Nigerian or who aren't in your own community. But I think that has come to. Is there any last few words that you want to say? Any advice, and then you can sort of tell us where people can find you, how people can stay in touch with you, and reach out to you if they need a therapy session. Because
Yeah, I think my last tidbit would just be life really happens in seasons. So I think a lot of times when we are like in the wilderness or going through something that seems so challenging, we are always asking why? Why is this happening? Why is this person not doing this? Why can't I? And sometimes I think there's when we're in wilderness rather, or like tough times, there's something that's being refined in you. And I think there's an opportunity, like what is being refined in me? Do I need to be more patient? How do I cultivate resiliency? Where am I being challenged to grow and to learn? So I would encourage anyone who's an immigrant or struggling in this season to kind of change the way you see it. Maybe instead of like, oh my gosh, this is so horrible. What is being refined in me? What am I learning? And then how do I want to go about this season of my life? Do I want to do it in joy or do I not want to do it in joy? Because as you guys can see, I'm a big proponent of agency. And I always tell my clients I'm not a gentle therapist. Like I will validate your feelings and be empathetic, but we still have to do the next thing. And I like seeing results, and
Mhm.
I track with my clients like what are the treatment goals? Are we actually making strides towards that? So I would say I'm always going to challenge anyone to choose how you want to go through this season and then make steps up. make um yeah, make steps towards that. So I would just say the season might be challenging, but there's so much to learn. We just need to change the way we think about it. And then if you want to do it in peace, if you want it to do it in joy, then you have to cultivate that. So I challenge you to run towards it, cultivate it, chase peace down, chase joy down, even in a season that um, doesn't seem like doesn't seem like I should be happy. Well, let's learn how to cultivate that happiness. But as far as where you can find me on Instagram, I'm at the dot therapy doll. So that's at THE.THERAPDOLL. I'm a girly girl, so therapy doll is where we just blend social science and all things girly. Over there, I practice out of Resilient Roots Counseling and Consulting PLLC in Garland, Texas. So I do in-person therapy in Garland, but I also do virtual across the state of Texas. And all this information can be found on the Instagram. And I'll probably send you guys like the
Yeah,
links and
so we'll
stuff if
put
we
them
can
in the
add it to the
description below. So
description.
yeah, so you'll be able to
Yep.
see it.
Awesome, awesome. I also do speaking engagements, so I have a link if you're ever trying to book me for speaking and other things.
Mm-hmm.
I speak at churches, women's events. Well, not exclusive to women's events, just events where
Mm-hmm.
you're needing a mental health expert. But I'm a yapper, so as you guys can tell, I enjoy doing that outside of just seeing my clients. So yeah, that's kind of my wrap up.
That was amazing. It was an amazing conversation. I hope it was not too heavy for y'all, but y'all be fine. You y'all be fine. I'm sure you everyone's listening. Um and even those who are not necessarily immigrating like per country, people have to move for jobs, people have to
Yeah.
um move
Look for
cities, people
love.
move for
Sorry.
love.
For love, definitely.
So I'm sure everyone listening to this can take something from the episode. Um
Mm-hmm.
as always, before we wrap up here, this is also a reminder again. Please, if you are not subscribed, if you're not following us on Apple Podcasts or
Mm-hmm.
subscribe on Apple Podcasts and following us on Spotify, please, what are you doing? Get your act together and hit that button. Um, make
Yes,
sure you
please.
go follow us on Instagram at psnapodcast.tm and follow us on Twitter or X at psnapod_tm and follow us on TikTok at peasinA.podcast. We would love to have conversations with you. We don't want this conversation to just end on this episode. We want to continue having conversations on how we can better show up in our different journeys. And I hope you enjoy the episode. We will see you in the next one. We'll be continuing this conversation, like I said, talking about cultural identity with me and Moya alone. But it was so lovely to have you, Bisola, on the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was a great
Yeah,
time.
thank you for
You
having
are
me.
so wise. I'm sure that all your clients and all people that reach out with you will definitely benefit from either working with you or getting
Mm-hmm.
services with you. And it's great that you give us some of your time today on the podcast.
Of
Yep.
course, thank you guys so much for having me.
No problem.